What's going on, people? My name is Batman, and if I work at Bungie or Activision, particularly in some sort of management or project lead role for Destiny, and assuming I possess a moderate level of intelligence, I would hate Borderlands for upstaging Destiny in the past and fear Borderlands for its potential to outplay Destiny in the future. I consider Borderlands and Destiny rivals, as far as their PvE goes at least. Their core mechanics and fundamentals are so similar that to have both games is almost entirely redundant, if not for the caveat that Destiny has PvP. Now, it's not a competition that will be paid much attention this year simply because the pre-sequel did not come out on the new gen, and as such is not in a position to really compete directly with Destiny this time around. But I think that Activision should thank their lucky stars for that, because if Destiny had come out side by side with Borderlands 2 a couple years ago, I think the contrast would have been very damaging, because it would reveal just how uninspired and, more importantly, how not revolutionary Destiny is. And in fact, I think Destiny might have received a much more positive reception among critics and players if Borderlands hadn't come out first. I mean, 5 years ago, when Bungie originally had this idea for an open-world social shooter, no Borderlands game had come out yet. But then, in the 5 years it took them to build Destiny, Borderlands dropped 2 titles, both of which I think upstaged Destiny. And I think a lot of the unfavorable reviews and negative consumer reactions to Destiny were driven in large part by the fact that Destiny propped itself up as this new era of gaming. I mean, literally, that's their words, not mine, and that's the words of reviewers, too. The news outlets that were releasing articles about this game before it came out. A new era of gaming. That's what everybody on their end said. And it is bringing in these new game mechanics that had not been done before, the shared world shooter and all that jazz. But then, when it actually dropped, nobody could find what was so revolutionary about it, because everything cool it did had already been done, and done more effectively by the first 2 Borderlands games. Because at the end of the day, these games really are trying to capitalize on the same formula and the same goals. And I think it's really important to compare them because, frankly, it's frustrating that Destiny got all the attention and revenue that it did when the only thing it did better than Borderlands was pre-launch advertising. And in fact, they didn't even necessarily do that better either. They just had more resources to blow. Now, obviously, both these games are trying to bring the MMO and the FPS shooter together, but more importantly, they are both trying to bring the MMO, or as close as you can get to an MMO, to the console. Now, MMOs are very popular. Obviously, you got WoW, you got LoL, Diablo, PlanetSide 2, you got Guild Wars, RuneScape. Say what you want about RuneScape, but for 5 years, that game was the shit, and it taught me everything I know about modern economies. RuneScape for life. Until 2007, that is. But still, my haters are my motivators. But anyways, I could make a 3-hour-long video talking about why MMOs are so popular, but we'll save that for another time. For now, suffice it to say, MMOs are extraordinarily popular, and that's why everyone and their mom tries to make a new one, like Tor or ESO or what have you. You can see the obvious wisdom in trying to bring that MMO formula to the console, because consoles are a highly populated market with a major MMO vacuum waiting to be filled by some lucky company. Gearbox and Bungie caught on to this at roughly the same time, but Gearbox executed faster, and more importantly, without giving fucks. Destiny and Borderlands are generally reaching for the same goal, to bring an addictive MMO to the massive first-person shooter console crowd that has been so profitable for games like Halo and COD in the past. But again, I feel strongly that Borderlands has done it much better, and I'm more excited about its future than I am the future of Destiny. Now, Destiny could have done it better if they had come through and delivered what they advertised. I think Destiny's second biggest failure behind its failed story narrative, its failed plotline, is its lack of social features. The one mechanic they could have used to really outdo Borderlands was this open world where they can fit a dozen players into free roam and let them create their own experiences that would bring the world to life through dynamic and unique gameplay. And that's their words, not mine. An open and social world that the players bring to life through their actions. That is what they advertise. But Destiny fell painfully short in this area. The hard truth is that Borderlands open world feels more alive with its 4 players and all its AI than Destiny does with its human players. There are a few reasons for this, the first being that social interaction isn't possible in Destiny. There's nothing you can do with all those other human players in the world except look at them. And I always say they might as well be bots. That Bungie might as well just put some AI in Guardian character models and just give them names above their heads that look like human usernames, such as YourMom69, and then program them to do one of 2 things: drive around from cave to cave picking up upgrade materials, or mindlessly fighting the same group of enemies as they respawn in the same exact location, again again and again. Or if it's in the tower, they can just stand still next to various vendors for various lengths of time. And nobody would ever know the difference. Nobody would ever be able to figure out that those human character models are actually just bots, because there's no way to interact with those other human players. There isn't even voice chat, and they don't do anything that a basic program couldn't do. They go from point A to point B, they fight enemies, or they stand next to vendors. This is what Bungie considers a living social world. Whereas Borderlands open world actually does feel alive. You know, both these games have matchmaking for the open world, but only one of them lets you actually communicate with the people you've been matchmade with. It's actually a great way to make new friends and meet new people. I made friends back on Borderlands 2 just in matchmaking. If they're a competent and mature player, and after you've been through a couple tough boss fights together and you're reviving each other and whatnot, bonds do form. And that's what brings a world to life for me. You know, I still play various games to this day with some of the friends I made back on Borderlands 1. And also, Borderlands has player trading. You know, there are forums online where you can go to look for potential sellers or buyers for particular items. If you find one, you guys meet up in the world and trade, and then what often happens is, because you're both already in the game, you both go and do some mission together to test out your new gear. Maybe if you really appreciate the way this one guy kept reviving you in dangerous situations because you kept getting shit on, and at the end of the mission you acquire some gear that is restricted to his class, instead of selling it, you gift it to him as a token of appreciation, which is literally something that someone did for me once, and we ended up being good friends. You know, you can challenge other players to a duel, you can bet items on the outcome of that duel, you can collaborate on in-game tactics. And I don't just mean, hey, I'm getting overrun over here, or hey, I need a revive, although that kind of collaboration isn't in Destiny either. I mean just setting up your class customization to complement one another. Like, hey, if all four of us run ammo regen mods, our rockets will replenish fast enough so that we can just spam rockets. Or hey, I'll be the medic because I have an insta revive skill, but I'm gonna run all defensive gear. You guys gotta focus on the DPS and the berserkers. Like, I can do that. I'll Rambo Gunzerker all the bad guys, but I'm gonna need to be revived frequently if by some chance I can't get the second wind. Or hey, if I go down, don't kill anyone around me, I'm trying to get the second wind on them, or something like that. You know what I mean? None of that is really possible in Destiny. There is no player trading, there is no collaboration or teamwork, because there's no voice chat or any form of communication possible, period. Now granted, that changes obviously if, you know, you have a party that you go into the game with, but if the idea is that you have to have your own party to begin with to make it a social world, then it's not really the game that is providing the social world. You're providing some social aspects to the game. And not just other players, but the AI themselves in Borderlands, I feel, provide a more dynamic, living, somewhat unscripted and non-linear open world experience that is absent in Destiny. One of my favorite tactics across all three Borderlands that has been a consistent go-to method for dealing with bandit camps that are above my level is to rile up some skags. You know, if you kill one, they all chase you, and then you lead them into a bandit camp, and then it starts this huge fight between the bandits and the skags, and I'm free to just rummage through the camp and search for the quest objective or what have you, and that right there is what brings the world to life for me. You know, it's this unscripted fight that I played a role in starting. I remember I felt really clever the first time I did it. Now the enemies in Destiny, they do fight each other, but it's almost pathetic how scripted it is. They won't chase you very far from their spawn points, and they'll just spawn the exact same amount and the exact same types of, you know, Cabal to fight the exact same types and amount of Vex in the exact same spot indefinitely. The pre-sequel has fixed enemy scaling, so if you walk by a cave at level 1, you're going to see a very different set of enemies than you'll see when you walk by that cave at level 50. And when bandits and skags are fighting one another, I know why. You know, the skags are wild beasts that want to eat bad guys, the bandits don't want to be eaten, and in fact probably want to eat the skags too. I know the Vault Guardians are fighting the Dahl soldiers because Dahl is trying to break into the vault and the Guardians have to protect it. But I have no fucking idea why the Cabal and the Vex are fighting. Nobody does. They're just fighting each other infinitely for no apparent reason. Also, if the Vex have time travel capabilities, why don't they just go back in time and find all their enemies, whether it's us, humans, or the Cabal, right when we're being born, and just spawn camp us at the womb? Plot hole much? Or do they not want to wipe us out because they want to bring balance of light and dark to the universe? Is this evidence of a much grander backstory? Nobody fucking cares, because the front story of Destiny barely exists, and when people don't even know what the fuck happened during the game, nobody gives a shit about what happened before or after the game. Borderlands story is what it is. You know, the comedy is very well written, and its primary advantages over Destiny are: 1, you know what's going on the whole time, and 2, you're interested to see what happens next. I think Borderlands also does good character development. You actually get to understand you know, the person or the persons talking into your ear the whole game, whereas it seems like most people just have a dull contempt for Dinklebot. Another huge goal and selling point that Destiny propped up pre-release was this huge level of immersion, right? An immersive galaxy that wasn't interrupted by main menus and such, right? So instead of having a main menu, they use the tower and your spaceships floating aimlessly in space as the de facto main menu. But again, this concept might have been unprecedented 5 years ago when they first thought of it, but the cold hard truth is that Borderlands already did it and did it better. The Sanctuary from Borderlands 2 shits all over the tower, as does Concordia now in the pre-sequel. And just to clarify real quick, I am kind of speaking of Borderlands, the series in general, because the point I really want to drive home is that it's not just the most recent Borderlands, which I actually consider the second best title in the series behind BL2, but it's the entire Borderlands formula that I think outplays Destiny in general. The home bases, or whatever you want to call them in Borderlands, are big cities with a lot to explore. Secret chests and Easter eggs and other meaningful collectibles, resources like money and ammo and even weapon drops sometimes if you open a crate and you get a common weapon out of there. All these things to be explored and found and acquired. There are multiple quests to be completed just inside that home base city. There's gambling. You know, you can hit the slot machines. There's now in this pre-sequel, there's weapon grinding where you can put together recipes and put together various types of guns of various rarities to generate better or simply different weapons. And most importantly, there are better commerce options. There's a more diverse selection of goods. There's a lot less redundancy than the tower shops. In Borderlands, there's one vendor for each distinct type of good to sell. There's the gun shop, the ammo and grenade shop, the shield and class mod shop, and then the guy who will, you know, increase the amount of space you have in your inventory or ammo types or bank or so on. In the tower, you'll get a headache just figuring out who to go to for what. I mean, there's 5 different people who will all sell you the same exact types of gear, just with different perks for the same price and type of currency. Crucible marks. Then there's another 3 who in a painfully redundant fashion sell the exact same kinds of gear with just different perks, except they only take Vanguard marks. And comparing the perks on one weapon in one shop to that of a different shop is a pain in the fucking ass, because you have to memorize everything about one of the weapons and then run all the way across the tower and compare to memory. There's not much variety and a lot of redundancy and a lot of irrelevancy. In Borderlands, there is always a reason to go check out the shops. The merchandise is always changing, and more importantly, it scales up with your level. It's often that people check a vendor and find a weapon that is more powerful than anything they currently have, so they buy it. And that's how it should be, using the shops to acquire meaningful in-game advantages, and it means that there's always extra incentive to be acquiring as much money as possible and dying as little as possible, because dying will bankrupt you pretty quickly. Whereas in Destiny, Glimmer is, I mean, people hit their 25,000 Glimmer cap and they're like, what the fuck do I do with all this Glimmer now? You know what I mean? There's not much to do with it because of irrelevancy. In the tower, the gunsmith becomes irrelevant after like level 10. He only ever sells green items, which means for the latter 90% of the game, there's no reason to check out his stock. Buying a random engram from the Cryptarch, I believe, will only ever produce green, so there's no reason to ever spend money there either. The speaker will sell you emblems for a pretty hefty sum of motes of light, which take a while to accrue. I don't think the vast majority of players ever waste their time or motes of light on his bitch ass. And then the entire right side of the tower is dedicated to ships and sparrows, but it's entirely meaningless because the ship is just something you look at while you're waiting for a match to start, and the sparrow upgrades are largely aesthetic, and even the best, most rare sparrow in the game won't even provide a meaningful in-game advantage because it's just used for fast travel. You never actually use it to overcome an in-game challenge of any sort. The Sanctuary and Concordia are immersive cities that have their own stories to tell and their own experiences to provide. The tower is a main menu that's just a pain in the ass to navigate. Really, the only 2 reasons you ever go to the tower is to turn in or get new bounties or to decrypt engrams. I honestly would prefer it if I could just do these 2 activities from my ship. It would take 30 seconds and I wouldn't have to go through the hassle of loading the tower and walking back and forth for 5 minutes just so Bungie can pretend I'm immersed and pat themselves on the back. The only meaningful commerce you ever do in the tower is probably when you spend your Vanguard or Crucible marks to buy something cool with them. But most of the stuff available is over 100 marks, and since you're capped at 100 marks per week, realistically, you're only going to be able to engage in said meaningful commerce like twice a month. And that's another thing I like about Borderlands. They let you play at your own pace. You never hit an invisible artificial wall that was put up just so you wouldn't outpace other players and make them feel less badass. And what also ruins the immersion in Destiny is having to back out of the world every time to do the next mission. And Destiny doesn't really count as an open world either. What it is a series of closed worlds that can fit various amounts of people into them. But I mean, in a real open world, you can spend hours at a time in that world. That's kind of the point. Whether you're farming or doing side quests and main quests or just fucking around, you can do all of these things in the same session without leaving the world. In Destiny, you're briefly in the open world whenever you start a mission. They make you travel from point A to point B inside that open world, but then when you reach the actual start of the mission, it like secretly takes you out of that open world, right? To make sure no randos can come interfere with your mission. So they could just cut the crap and start the mission at the point where they load you into your own private match anyways, but of course then you wouldn't be immersed in the super social open world. And of course you have to back out to their main menu, the ship screen, every time you want to start a new mission of any sort. In Destiny's closed world, you can do those patrol missions or farm resources. It's about as empty, pointless, and redundant as an open world game has ever been. Now lastly, the combat. Both these games have high quality PvE combat, but I would argue that Borderlands provides a higher level of replayability just because of the sheer amount of customization options it offers. Now in terms of just sheer character builds, these games are about on par. They both have skill trees of the same size and diversity. However, Borderlands boasts 3 subclasses to Destiny's 2, and Borderlands boasts 4 primary classes to Destiny's 3. And I would also argue you can really notice a bigger difference in terms of gameplay variety between the classes and subclasses in Borderlands than in Destiny. A lot of the time in Destiny, it feels like the only significant and noticeable difference between the classes' gameplay is the super, right? But the supers themselves, excluding the Defender, Titan, Shield, almost always serve the same purpose. They just inflict a massive amount of damage in a very short period of time in a limited location. Whereas most of the action skills in Borderlands, which are basically equivalent of Destiny's supers, are much more diverse. You have DPS action skills, but you also have stealth-based action skills that let you sneak into an area and maybe like grab the quest item and get the fuck out of there. You have action skills that draw aggro and create a distraction to let you recover or deal your own DPS to a boss, and the DPS action skills themselves are more varied too. I think there's a big gameplay difference between Claptrap's self-destruct DPS action skill and Athene's aim hack DPS skill, you know what I mean? In Destiny, it's kind of like you can deal a massive amount of damage to this target with a Void Blast, a Titan Smash, or cutting into it with the Blade Dancer, but at the end of the day, it's the same process. You aim at the target, hit left and right bumper, at the same time, you deal a massive amount of damage, and that's the super, you know? There isn't a lot of creative freedom for how to employ these supers. And Borderlands has a wider range of perk options laced in their gear as well. You know, does your shield drop a shield booster when you take damage? Does it let out a Nova Blast when it's depleted? Does it give you health regeneration, etc., etc.? There are many different possibilities that will each play a distinctly different role in your combat experience, and that's true for every piece of gear in Borderlands. Now, Destiny has a strong selection of perks as well, but sometimes it's harder to notice the difference they are making during combat. Things like, you know, one random shotgun shell deals a lot more damage, or these boots let you hold more auto rifle ammo. Picking up an orb replenishes some health. They are meaningful advantages, but they don't always add as much to the gameplay experience. They don't add as much to gameplay variety and replayability, like what you are actually acknowledging as you fight, you know what I mean? But the primary difference I want to point out between these two games' combat challenges is the skill gap. The way that skill gap makes games creatively engaging, and how Destiny, I think, purposely shed this skill gap in order to appeal to a larger market. In most MMOs, WoW, RuneScape, whatever, whether you're fighting an AI or against another player, a large portion of the skill involved in winning that fight is utilized long before said fight even begins. When you're playing Borderlands, you're in a constant arms race with the content. Every time you progress to a new story mission, the content gets stronger, and if you fail to keep up, it will outlevel you, and then you'll start dying a lot during the missions, which will cost you a lot of money, which will of course make it even harder to keep pace with the content. And if you get caught in this vicious cycle of dying, getting outleveled by the content because of it, and thus dying more and getting outleveled that much more, you'll never be able to consistently attain the highest level loot that most players seek, as that is of course the primary goal of a loot-driven shooter such as Borderlands or Destiny. So to keep up with the content, players have to complete side quests, complete side objectives in those side quests, earn badass ranks, which requires killing certain amounts of enemies in various types of ways to various amounts, which provides a lot of incentive to go around doing, you know, random stuff in the open world, which again kind of brings the open world more to life. These badass ranks, which give you percentage modifiers to things like gun damage and shield capacity, and of course earning lots of money so you can buy better gear, checking every vendor as often as possible to make sure you aren't missing out on any of the higher level gear, collecting loot to sell or looting that high gear which you seek, period, discovering grinder recipes and grinding loot for better loot. All these things are what will define how powerful your character is when you enter into a fight, and ultimately that power will play a much bigger role in determining the outcome of said fight than how you play in the actual fight. And that's not to say that, you know, there's no skill involved in the actual fight itself, but I'd say it's about, you know, maybe 35-65, 65 being the amount of work you put into making your character powerful before you got into the fight, 35% skill in the actual fight. Now, this is much more pronounced in Borderlands during the true Vault Hunter mode than it is during the initial playthrough. The initial playthrough is kind of easy mode, and they admit as much. But this system of fight preparation playing a bigger role in the fight's outcome is true in most open world games and most MMOs. Whether it's Skyrim or Fallout or World of Warcraft, skill in these kinds of games comes down to gear acquisition and intelligent character progression. As an example, there's this one huge fucking spaceship boss. That thing was shitting all over my face the first time I fought it. I literally could not beat it. I could not progress further because there was just no way for me to kill it before it killed me. I got sent back to Concordia with my tail between my legs, so I proceeded to complete 2 side quests to level up. They got me most of the way, but after finishing them, I was still just a tiny ways away from leveling, so I went and attacked a random bandit camp and some skag caves in the open world. That got me my level up. Then I checked a bunch of various vendors and bought a better rocket launcher and a better shield, and then I went back and blew that fucking ship out of the sky. But beating it didn't require me necessarily playing better in the fight, and indeed, no matter how well I played, I think I still would have lost because I was just getting out DPS at too fast a rate for skill to make up the difference. And that is what makes an open world experience special and different from other more linear games. And Borderlands doesn't even have player crafting, which would add a whole new dimension to the gameplay, of course, and that's what makes, you know, Skyrim and Fallout and other MMOs so popular and so fun and so dynamic and so diverse and alive. And not to mention that Borderlands player trading is nothing compared to the massive in-game economies of those other MMOs, such as World of Warcraft or RuneScape. But ultimately, this is an area in which I feel Destiny fell short. It seems like even after the last round of patches, the most creative method people can find for player progression is some random cave or other mob spawn that allows for the kind of farming that doesn't require you to move or think. There isn't really a variety of options for getting stronger. There are technically side quests, but I think very few people even realize that those missions are side missions, because they're the exact same length as the more official story missions. They follow the same formula of traveling from point A to point B and then defend Dinklebot and then fight a boss. And they have the same amount of narrative-driven content as well. There isn't crafting or player trading. The in-game economy, I don't know what you call it, your management of resources lacking player trading allows for a limited amount of strategic resource management at best, and at the end of the day, it's kind of pointless to even upgrade your gear before you have legendaries, because if you put a bunch of time and effort into upgrading your rare, you're just going to feel really annoyed when you have to do it all over again for your superior piece of legendary equipment. You'll be annoyed because the primary combat preparation activity in Destiny is resource farming in the open world, which is an incredibly repetitive and monotonous experience that nobody likes to do, and there's never any opportunity for unique experiences to take place. Everybody's story is the same. They went back and forth from cave to cave holding down X. Destiny is kind of like a big old hamster wheel. It provides the illusion of progression, but sooner or later you realize you haven't gone anywhere at all. You're doing the same shit you were doing at level 1. This is the last video I'll make hating on Destiny. You know, I don't want to milk all this negativity. I've made my point. I won't drag it out. Instead, we will look to the future, to what can be, to what shall be, and what do you want in that future. For Borderlands 3, which I'm confident may try and go the same route as Destiny has gone, with getting more than 4 players into the world and whatnot, and what do you want from Destiny 2? Please be sure to rate the video. This is Batman, signing out.
Oh, never mind.